September 15, 2018 marked the beginning of the end, though Robert Chen wouldn't realize it for months to come. The evening descended on Beverly Hills with its usual golden grace, casting long shadows through Beverly Wilshire's pristine windows. At 62, Robert had crafted his life into a series of comfortable routines. Every Friday at 7, he could be found at Table 23, the corner spot that offered both privacy and a view of the restaurant's elegant sweep. His empire, Chen Real Estate Development, had just closed another record-breaking quarter. The Los Angeles skyline bore his signature in glass and steel, each building a testament to 3 decades of calculated risks and relentless drive. But success, Robert had discovered, was a poor companion for dinner. Your usual Bordeaux, Mr. Shen? Thomas, the sommelier who had served him for 12 years, appeared with practiced timing. Robert nodded, his attention divided between his phone's endless emails and the familiar comfort of routine. He hadn't noticed the new hostess watching him from her station, studying his movements with the precision of a chess master evaluating her next move. Sophia Torres had spent 3 weeks learning Robert Chen's patterns. She knew his wine preference, 2005 Chateau Margaux, his dietary restrictions, no shellfish, and the exact angle at which he liked his table's chair to face the window. Such details were her art form. "Good evening, Mr. Chen." Her voice carried just the right blend of deference and warmth, pitched to cut through his distraction without seeming intrusive. "I hope you don't mind. I've adjusted your table's position slightly. The evening light was particularly harsh today." Robert looked up, and for the first time in years, his carefully constructed world shifted on its axis. Sophia stood before him in the restaurant's standard. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, revealing a graceful neck adorned with a single delicate pearl pendant. But it was her eyes that caught him. Intelligent, warm, with a hint of something that looked like recognition. "You're new," he said, surprising himself by engaging. Usually, staff were background elements in his carefully ordered world. 3 weeks now," she replied, her slight accent adding music to her words. "The staff speaks very highly of you. They say you built half of modern Los Angeles." A practiced line, delivered with such genuine-seeming interest that Robert felt himself responding despite his usual reserve. "Hardly half, though the view tower downtown is one of ours." "The one with the rooftop garden?" Sophia's eyes lit up. "I walk past it every morning. The way it catches the sunrise, it's like watching the city wake up in a mirror of gold." Robert found himself studying her more carefully. Most people mentioned the building's height or its prestigious tenants. The rooftop garden was his personal touch, a detail he'd insisted on despite the additional cost. "You have an eye for architecture?" he asked, following her to his table. "More for the way spaces affect people," she replied, adjusting his napkin with practiced grace. "In my previous work as an event planner, I learned that the right environment can transform an ordinary moment into something magical." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Robert discovered that Sophia had worked for exclusive events companies in Madrid and New York before coming to Los Angeles. She spoke about design and atmosphere with genuine passion, painting pictures with her words that resonated with his own vision for urban spaces. "And now you're hosting at the Beverly Wilshire?" he asked, genuinely curious about the career shift. Sophia's smile held just the right touch of self-deprecation. "Sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward. Los Angeles is expensive. I'm building contacts, learning about the city. My dream is to establish my own event planning company here, but dreams take time." As Robert drove home that evening in his Mercedes S-Class, Sophia Torres occupied his thoughts in a way no woman had since Margaret's death 5 years ago. He found himself analyzing their conversation, remembering the intelligent spark in her eyes when she discussed business, the graceful way she carried herself, the hint of vulnerability beneath her professional demeanor. What he didn't notice was the small tracking device magnetically attached to his car's undercarriage during his dinner, or the encrypted message sent from Sophia's phone. Phase 1 initiated. Subject responsive. At her modest one-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood, rented specifically for this operation, Sophia was already at work. Her designer dress hung forgotten as she sat before 3 monitors, each displaying different aspects of Robert Chen's life. The real Sophia Torres was buried beneath layers of careful construction, like the sets she used to design in another life. Initial contact successful. She spoke into an encrypted line, her accent now completely gone. He's exactly as profiled, lonely, successful, with a weakness for people who appreciate his artistic side. A woman's voice responded in crisp Spanish. Remember, Sophia, this is our biggest operation yet. The Chen fortune is worth the extra time. No mistakes like Monaco. Monaco was different, Sophia replied, her voice hardening. This time, I have everything under control. Meanwhile, across town in Brentwood, Michelle Chen Howard sat in her home office, frowning at her laptop screen. As the eldest Chen child and CFO of her father's company, she had developed a sixth sense for threats to the family empire. A routine background check on new hotel staff had flagged something about the Beverly Wilshire's recent hires, but the data was inconclusive. James, she called her brother, who had inherited their mother's technical genius. I need you to look into something for me. James Chen, surrounded by multiple screens in his Silicon Valley home office, was already ahead of her. The new hostess? I'm on it. There's something off about her employment history. The Madrid company she listed, it exists, but their records show no Sophia Torres during that period. Dad mentioned her at dinner on Sunday. Sarah, the youngest Chen sibling, chimed in on the conference call. He never mentioned staff. The Chen siblings had developed this protective network after their mother's death, watching over their father's interests while respecting his independence. They'd seen him weather the loss of their mother with characteristic strength, throwing himself into work and philanthropy. But they also saw his loneliness, carefully hidden behind business meetings and charity galas. Let's not overreact, Michelle cautioned, though her instincts were screaming warnings. Dad's a grown man. He can talk to whoever he wants. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, their father was doing something he hadn't done in years. He was looking at his phone's personal contacts, debating whether to send a message to the number Sophia had quietly slipped him with his receipt. In her apartment, Sophia watched Robert's cursor blink in the message composition window, courtesy of the spyware that had already infiltrated his phone during their brief interaction. Her lips curved in a smile as she saw him type, delete, and retype a simple message. Thank you for the conversation this evening. Would you be interested in continuing it over coffee? Sophia waited exactly 17 minutes before responding. I would like that very much, Mr. Chen. Though I should mention that I'm not in the habit of meeting clients outside of work. Robert's response came quickly. Please, call me Robert, and I promise to discuss topics other than wine preferences and table positions. In the soft glow of her monitors, Sophia allowed herself a moment of professional pride. Robert Chen was everything their intelligence had suggested. Sophisticated, intelligent, and desperately lonely beneath his polished exterior. The perfect mark. She carefully crafted her response. In that case, Robert, I know a lovely little cafe in Venice. They have an architect's view of the canals. As she sent the message, Sophia opened another file on her computer. Photos of previous marks filled the screen. Wealthy men from across Europe and Asia, each one carefully chosen, meticulously studied, and systematically destroyed. Robert Chen's picture now sat at the top of the folder, marked active. The game had begun. October brought Santa Ana winds and change to Los Angeles. The coffee meeting in Venice turned into dinner at Giorgio Baldi, which led to long walks along Montana Avenue. Robert Chen found himself looking forward to Sophia's texts, each one carefully crafted to appeal to both his intellect and his growing emotional attachment. The problem with modern development, Sophia said one evening as they walked past a new construction site, is that it often forgets the human element. But your buildings, they remember people need beauty as much as function. Robert squeezed her hand, marveling at how naturally their fingers had intertwined. That's exactly what I've always said. Margaret, my late wife, she used to tell me I was building homes for dreams, not just offices for work. Sophia's face showed just the right amount of gentle understanding. Inside, she filed away another piece of useful information. Every mention of Margaret was a thread she could weave into her tapestry of manipulation. Meanwhile, the Chen siblings' investigation was hitting walls. James found himself frustrated by Sophia's perfect digital footprint. Too perfect, he thought, but he couldn't prove it. "Look at this," he told Michelle during one of their secure video calls. Her social media history goes back 8 years. Photos at events in Madrid, New York, Singapore, professional recommendations, even tax returns. But what? Michelle leaned closer to her screen. It's like looking at a reflection of a reflection. Everything's there, but something feels off. The timestamps on some photos don't match the metadata. The testimonials use suspiciously similar language patterns. Sarah, joining the call from her medical office, added her own concerns. "Dad's different. He started taking these herbal supplements Sophia recommended. When I asked to look at them, he got defensive." "He's in love," Michelle said, the words tasting bitter. "Or at least, he thinks he is." What they couldn't see was the elaborate operation running behind Sophia's carefully constructed facade. In a secure facility in Bogotá, a team of digital experts maintained her false identity, updating social media in real time, managing a network of fake contacts, and monitoring any attempts to investigate her background. Sophia herself was executing a masterpiece of social engineering. Every date was choreographed, every conversation designed to deepen Robert's emotional investment. She learned to mirror his body language, to laugh at precisely the right moments, to show just enough vulnerability to awaken his protective instincts. "I've never told anyone this," she confided one night over dinner at his Malibu home. "But my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. My aunt raised me, but, well, let's just say she was more interested in my inheritance than my welfare." Robert reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The story was false, like everything about Sophia, but the tears in her eyes were real, produced on command through years of practice. "Is that why you came to America?" he asked softly. Sophia nodded, letting her voice catch slightly. "I wanted to build something of my own, something beautiful. When I saw your buildings, especially the view tower, I felt like someone finally understood what I was trying to achieve." That night, as Robert kissed her goodbye, Sophia sent another encrypted message. "Target fully engaged. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 arrived in the form of a crisis. Sophia's fictional event planning company suddenly faced a lawsuit from a wealthy client. The amount demanded, $2.3 million, was carefully calculated to be significant, but not suspicious given Robert's worth. "I'll fight it," Sophia told him, her voice brave but trembling. "I've worked too hard to let them destroy my dream." Robert's response was predictable. "Let me help. My lawyers." "No," Sophia interrupted, standing up from his couch. "I can't take advantage of our relationship like that. This is my problem to solve." She moved to leave, but Robert caught her hand. "Sophia, please, let me do this for you. Not as a businessman, but as someone who cares deeply about you." In the soft lighting of his living room, Sophia's smile held genuine triumph beneath its apparent gratitude. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. What none of them realized was that Sarah Chen had finally found something concrete. In a medical journal from 2016, she discovered a case study from Singapore describing symptoms identical to those her father had recently developed, symptoms that had started shortly after he began taking Sophia's herbal supplements. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen until her eyes burned. The Singapore case study detailed a sophisticated poison cocktail designed to mimic natural heart failure, a combination of seemingly harmless herbs that, when combined, created a potentially lethal compound. The victim had been a prominent businessman. The suspected perpetrator was never caught. "Look at Dad's symptoms," Sarah explained to her siblings during an emergency meeting in Michelle's Brentwood home. "Intermittent arrhythmia, subtle cognitive changes, gradual weakening. It's a textbook." James paced the room, his typical calm shattered. "We need to tell him." "He won't believe us," Michelle said, her corporate composure cracking. "You've seen how he is with her. Last week, he actually snapped at me for suggesting a background check on her company before he invested." The investment, $2.5 million to help Sophia fight her fictional lawsuit, had gone through that morning. The money was already moving through a labyrinth of offshore accounts, its trail growing colder by the hour. In her West Hollywood apartment, Sophia was celebrating with a glass of Chateau Margaux, Robert's favorite. Her real phone, secured with military-grade encryption, displayed a message from her handler. Money received. Initiate final phase. The final phase was elegant in its simplicity. Over the next few weeks, Robert's health would deteriorate rapidly. Sophia, the devoted girlfriend, would nurse him through his illness. After his death, ruled as heart failure due to stress and age, she would emerge as the grieving, almost fiancée. The prenuptial agreement, already drafted and hidden in Robert's study, would ensure her claim to a significant portion of his estate. But Sophia hadn't accounted for Sarah Chen's medical expertise or James's technological persistence, and she certainly hadn't expected Michelle's corporate connections to reach as far as they did. Meanwhile, Robert Chen was experiencing his own doubts, though he buried them deep. Little inconsistencies in Sophia's stories began to nag at him. The way she sometimes responded to business questions with too much knowledge for someone who claimed to be new to Los Angeles real estate. The occasional slip in her accent when she was tired. Still, love, or what he believed to be love, has a way of drowning out the whispers of suspicion. "I think we should take a trip," Sophia suggested one evening, curled against him on his sofa. "Somewhere peaceful. The Maldives, perhaps? You've been so stressed lately." Robert smiled, ignoring the strange flutter in his heart that had become more frequent. "The Maldives sounds perfect, though I should probably check with my doctor first. These palpitations." "I'm sure it's just stress," Sophia soothed, sliding a fresh cup of herb tea toward him. "My aunt used to have similar problems. These traditional remedies worked wonders for her." Across town, Sarah Chen was racing through medical databases, cross-referencing cases. James had finally cracked something in Sophia's digital fortress, a pattern in the code maintaining her online presence that matched known signatures of a criminal organization. Michelle's contact at Interpol had sent her a heavily redacted file. Similar cases had appeared in Singapore, Dubai, and Monaco. Wealthy men, mysterious illnesses, a beautiful woman who disappeared just before or after their deaths. The methods evolved, but the pattern remained consistent. "We're running out of time," Sarah told her siblings. "These toxins, they're reaching critical levels in his system. If we don't stop this now..." James finished her thought. "We'll be planning a funeral instead of an intervention." Michelle stood at her office window, looking out over the city their father had helped build. "Then we stop playing defense. Sophia Torres wants to hunt? Let's show her what happens when the prey bites back." But Sophia was already moving to the next phase. That night, as Robert slept fitfully beside her, she adjusted the dosage in his supplements. In 3 days, they would leave for the Maldives. In 5 days, Robert Chen would suffer a massive cardiac event in their private villa. By the time anyone could reach them, it would be too late. What she didn't know was that Sarah had already convinced the family doctor to run specialized toxicology screens under the guise of routine tests. The results would reach her inbox within hours. The game was shifting, the hunters becoming the hunted. But in this deadly dance, one wrong move could still cost Robert Chen his life. The toxicology report arrived at 3:47 a.m., its contents confirming Sarah's worst fears. The combination of toxins in Robert's blood wasn't just dangerous, it was lethal in its sophistication. Each compound had been chosen to mask the others, creating a cascade of symptoms that would appear natural to all but the most suspicious observers. Digitalis derivatives, oleander extract, and something I've never seen before. Sarah explained to her siblings via secure video conference. It's like someone took the Singapore case and perfected it. James, who hadn't slept in 36 hours, pulled up a new screen of data. "I found something else. The code signature I traced, it led to a ghost server in Estonia. Someone's been monitoring Dad's phones, his email, even his home security system." Michelle's voice was steel. "How long until we can move?" "The Maldives trip is in 3 days, James replied. "If she gets him there." "We move tonight," Michelle decided. "Sarah, get the medical team ready. James, I need everything you have on her real identity. I'm calling in some favors." Across the city, Sophia was making her own preparations. The special blend of herbs for Robert's morning tea was nearly depleted. She wouldn't need more. In her bathroom, a bottle of antidote remained untouched. She had long since developed immunity to her own poisons. Her burner phone buzzed with a message from her handler. "Situation compromised. Chen children investigating. Abort?" Sophia smiled, typing back. proceeding as planned, too close to extraction. What Sophia didn't know was that her encrypted communications were no longer as secure as she believed. James Chen hadn't just traced her digital footprint, he had infiltrated it. Every message she sent was now being intercepted, every plan revealed. Robert Chen sat in his office at the View Tower, reviewing contracts but unable to focus. The morning's dose of herbal supplements had left him feeling worse than usual. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass, and for the first time, he allowed himself to acknowledge the fear that had been building. Something was wrong. Not just with his health, but with the perfect story of Sophia Torres. His phone buzzed, a text from Michelle. "Dad, family dinner tonight. Non-negotiable. Sarah's cooking." Before he could respond, Sophia called. Her voice held its usual warmth, but something else too. Urgency. "Robert, darling, why don't we have dinner at that new place in Malibu? Just the two of us, before all the trip preparations tomorrow." For the first time since meeting her, Robert Chen made a decision that went against Sophia's wishes. "Actually, I promised the children I'd have dinner with them tonight. Why don't you join us?" The pause before her response was microscopically too long. "Oh, darling, I wouldn't want to intrude on family time. Besides, I have some last-minute business to handle for the lawsuit." "I insist," Robert said, his voice firmer than he intended. "It's time you met them properly." In her apartment, Sophia's face hardened. This wasn't part of the plan. The Chen siblings were dangerous. She'd known that from the start. Meeting them now, so close to the endgame, but refusing would be more suspicious. "Of course, darling. What time should I arrive?" As she hung up, Sophia began making contingency plans. The passports and documents in her safe weren't just for the Maldives trip. They included 3 separate escape identities, each perfect enough to withstand international scrutiny. What she didn't realize was that she had just walked into a trap 5 years in the making. Since their mother's death, the Chen siblings had prepared for every threat to their father's well-being. They had resources Sophia couldn't imagine, connections that went far beyond business and medicine. Sarah Chen's kitchen became a command center. As she prepared their father's favorite dishes, a medical team assembled in the guest house, equipped with everything needed to begin emergency treatment. James coordinated with cybersecurity experts who had quietly surrounded the house with a digital net that would capture every communication attempt. And Michelle Chen Howard made one final call to a woman whose own family had been destroyed by a similar scheme in Singapore 5 years earlier. A woman who had spent her fortune and influence tracking a poison expert across 3 continents. "She's here," the woman confirmed. "I'm on my way. Don't let her leave." The table was set, the trap was ready, and Sophia Torres was about to discover that she wasn't the only predator in Los Angeles. Sarah Chen's Brentwood home glowed warmly in the evening light, its Mediterranean architecture a perfect setting for what was about to unfold. The air was thick with the aroma of Taiwanese beef noodle soup, their father's favorite comfort food, and something else: tension. Sophia arrived at precisely 7 p.m., elegant in a navy silk dress that cost more than a month's salary for the hostess she pretended to be. She carried an expensive bottle of wine and wore the jade pendant Robert had given her last week, a family heirloom that had belonged to his mother. Michelle noticed the pendant immediately, her jaw tightening imperceptibly. That piece was supposed to go to Sarah on her wedding day. "Sophia, welcome to our home," Sarah greeted, her medical training helping her maintain a perfect smile. She took Sophia's coat, discreetly pressing a nearly microscopic sensor onto the fabric, one that would monitor heart rate, perspiration, and other stress indicators. James hung back, his laptop open on the kitchen counter, supposedly working, but actually monitoring every electronic signal in and around the house. Sophia's phone was already compromised, but they had detected 2 other devices on her person, both heavily encrypted. Robert Chen sat at the head of the table, looking tired but happy to have his family together. The tremor in his hand was more pronounced as he reached for his water glass. "The soup smells wonderful," Sophia said, taking her seat beside Robert. "Your mother's recipe?" "Actually," Sarah replied, ladling the steaming broth into bowls, "it's our grandmother's. Mom preferred to make her own versions. She was quite the experimental cook." Sophia didn't miss the use of past tense. Robert has told me so much about Margaret. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was, Michelle said, her voice carrying a weight that made Sophia glance up sharply. She taught us to be very protective of what matters. The soup was served, accompanied by small plates of traditional side dishes. Sophia reached for her spoon but paused when she noticed no one else had started eating. It's tradition, James explained, his eyes never leaving his screen, to wait for the eldest to begin. Robert lifted his spoon, but Sarah's hand gently touched his arm. Actually, Dad, I made something special for you. A different broth with herbs that should help with your condition. Sophia's chopsticks still. Oh? I didn't realize Robert was on any special diet. He isn't, Sarah said pleasantly, placing a different bowl in front of her father. But as his doctor, I've been concerned about some recent changes in his health. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Sophia's smile remained perfect, but her fingers tightened slightly around her chopsticks. You never mentioned Sarah was your doctor, darling, she said to Robert. Didn't I? Robert's voice was tired, but his eyes were clearer than they had been in weeks. The tremor in his hand had steadied somewhat. Sarah insisted on it after Margaret. Family taking care of family. Michelle leaned forward. Speaking of family, Sophia, tell us about your aunt in Madrid, the one who raised you after your parents' accident? Yes, James added without looking up from his laptop. The one who lived on Calle de Serrano? Number 47, wasn't it? Sophia's pulse quickened, the sensor on her coat registering the change. That address had been buried in her fabricated background, mentioned only once in a falsified school record. I'm surprised you remember the address, she said smoothly. I don't believe I've mentioned it. You haven't, Michelle confirmed. Just like you haven't mentioned your time in Singapore, or Monaco, or Dubai. The front door opened and closed quietly. Footsteps approached the dining room. Or your real name, said a new voice, one that made Sophia's carefully constructed facade crack for the first time. Hello, Isabella. It's been 5 years. Standing in the doorway was an elegant Asian woman in her 50s, her presence commanding the room. Sophia, or Isabella, went very still, her hand inching toward her purse. I wouldn't, James said, finally looking up. Those 2 devices you're carrying? They've been deactivated, along with the emergency beacon in your necklace. Robert Chen looked between his children and the woman he had thought he loved, understanding dawning in his eyes. Sophia? Dad, Sarah said gently, please drink your broth. It contains the antidote to what's been making you sick. Isabella's face transformed, beauty hardening into something predatory. Antidote? Prove it. Prove any of this. We don't have to, said the Asian woman, walking fully into the room. The Singapore police have been building their case for 5 years. Your handler in Bogota rolled over an hour ago. It's over. Outside, silent figures moved into position around the house. Inside, Isabella calculated her remaining options and found none. Robert, she tried one last time, reaching for his hand. They're trying to turn you against me. Everything I told you, everything we shared, was a lie, Robert finished, his voice heavy with pain that wasn't entirely physical. Like the lies you told Henry Wong in Singapore, before he died of natural causes in his sleep? The Asian woman, Mrs. Wong, stepped closer. My husband trusted you, like Robert trusted you. But this time, you miscalculated. You should have researched the children more carefully. Isabella's laugh was sudden and sharp. The devoted children. Tell me, Robert, did they mention they've been monitoring your phones, controlling your security, making decisions about your life without consulting you? To protect him, Michelle said firmly, from people like you. We learned after Mom, Sarah added. We weren't going to lose another parent to someone who saw him as a target instead of a person. The sound of car doors closing outside was followed by authoritative knocks at the front and back doors. James closed his laptop with a decisive click. The evidence has been transmitted to Interpol, he said. Every communication, every transaction, every digital breadcrumb you thought you'd erased. Isabella stood slowly, her elegance undiminished even in defeat. Impressive, she said, and meant it. I suppose proper introductions are in order. Isabella Cardenas, formerly of... We know who you are, Mrs. Wong interrupted. The question is, do you know what you've become? Robert Chen watched the woman he had almost loved being led away by international authorities, his children surrounding him protectively. The jade pendant was recovered, his mother's legacy returned to the family. Later, as Sarah supervised his medical treatment and his system was slowly cleansed of poisons, Robert Chen realized that love had indeed saved his life. Not the false love of a beautiful stranger, but the fierce, protective love of his children. 3 months after the dinner that ended Isabella Cardenas' career, Robert Chen stood at the window of his Malibu home, watching the Pacific turn gold in the sunset. His hands no longer trembled, and the fog that had clouded his thoughts had lifted completely. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Isabella's operation. 7 victims across 3 continents, millions in stolen assets, a network of professionals who maintained her false identities and moved her ill-gotten gains through a maze of shell companies. The case had made international headlines, though the Chen family had managed to keep their involvement relatively private. "Your test results are perfect," Sarah said, reviewing his latest labs on her tablet. She had made it a habit to visit every few days, monitoring his recovery with both professional and daughterly concern. "The last traces of the toxins are gone." Robert nodded, still watching the ocean. "And the company?" "Michelle has everything under control," Sarah assured him. "The View Tower project is actually ahead of schedule." Indeed, Michelle had seamlessly stepped in during his recovery, proving herself more than capable of running Chen development. The board had been impressed by her handling of both the company and the crisis, though they didn't know the full story. James had dismantled the surveillance system he'd built around their father, though some basic security measures remained in place. "Just standard protocols," he'd explained, "the same ones we use for any high-profile client." The stolen money had been recovered, most of it anyway, thanks to Michelle's financial acumen and James's cyber-tracking abilities. The $2.5 million Robert had invested in Sophia's fictional lawsuit was found in accounts scattered across Eastern Europe and returned. "Have you heard from Mrs. Wang?" Robert asked, finally turning from the window. Sarah nodded. "She's back in Singapore. The foundation she started to help fraud victims is doing well. She's asked if you'd consider joining the board." Robert smiled slightly. "Maybe, in time." The healing process wasn't just physical. Robert had to come to terms with how completely he'd been deceived, how his judgment had been clouded by loneliness and the desire to believe in a second chance at love. The jade pendant sat in his safe, waiting for the right moment to be passed on to Sarah. "You know," he said carefully, "when your mother died, I thought my life was divided into before and after. Now I realize there are many befores and afters. The trick is learning from each one." Sarah set down her tablet and joined him at the window. "Dad, I'm not angry," he assured her, knowing what she was about to say. "About the surveillance, the monitoring. You were protecting me, like your mother would have." "We might have been overzealous," Sarah admitted. "Maybe, but you were right, and I'm proud of you, all of you. Not just for saving my life, but for who you've become. Your mother would be proud too." The sun was almost gone now, leaving streaks of purple and orange across the sky. In the gathering dusk, Robert Chen felt truly clear-headed for the first time in months. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the Wang Foundation's work, about other families who might not be as fortunate as ours, who might not have children with the resources to protect them." Sarah listened as her father outlined his idea, a partnership between Chen Development, the Wang Foundation, and a network of professionals who could help identify and prevent similar schemes. It would require legal expertise, technological innovation, and medical knowledge. In other words, it would require exactly what the Chen siblings had to offer. "A way to turn something painful into something positive," Robert concluded. "Your mother always said that was the secret to moving forward." Later that evening, as the Chen family gathered for dinner, a real family dinner, with takeout containers and comfortable silences, Robert looked at his children and felt not loss or regret, but profound gratitude. Isabella had sought to exploit what she saw as weakness, a grieving widower's loneliness. Instead, she had inadvertently revealed the true strength of family bonds. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm outside, its waves a reminder that even the deepest wounds could be cleansed, given time and care. The Chen family had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. And somewhere in an international detention facility, Isabella Cardenas was learning a lesson she had forgotten in her years of predatory schemes. Some fortunes can't be stolen, some bonds can't be broken, and some loves are powerful enough to heal even the deepest poisons.